Are you in favour of exploring other possible sort of technological solutions to tackling climate change, like, for instance, some of the geoengineering ideas that have been floated in the scientific community?
Well, I think geoengineering is probably the most difficult of all the more popular ones, actually, for obvious reasons. I think we should certainly be exploring the ideas, and I think there's a healthy debate about them. The Royal Society has published at least a preliminary document on geoengineering, which doesn't take us much further. But if the one thing that document does say is that we should have more public engagement.
Yes, indeed.
Which doesn't seem to have been very obvious. It's certainly not been funded. I think the carbon capture technologies are, some of them are quite risky, clearly, and the bigger issues, it's actually manipulating the weather, for example, seem hugely unpredictable in their effects. And it would be, I mean, in that respect, geoengineering would be rather like genetic engineering. Both would be equally unpredictable. And probably, I mean, we've agreed as biologists that genetic engineering of human beings, there should be a moratorium.
Yes.
Because it is so risky. You could argue that geoengineering might be in the same category.
Yes. I know you've written extensively, including in your new book, about the potential negative impacts of new inventions that may appear to have great benefits, more benefits than disadvantages to start with.
I'm not a science skeptic. I mean, don't.
Of course not.
You know, I mean, Bad Ideas, the book you're referring to, is simply, if you like, a shot across the bows of people who simply go on television and talk about the wonder of science. To my mind, that's not an acceptable way any longer of engaging the public. I think we need to have much more reflective, mature debate about what we do in science and how we exploit the technologies more effectively and more safely. And we certainly haven't done that with the climate change issues.
No, no. So one final question then, just coming back to your point about the importance of stories alongside facts, engaging the public and sort of helping people to understand the science, and also thinking about how they might respond to the science in their own lives. Is there particular evidence in the sort of real world that you've seen of climate change, or particular stories that you would want to use to engage the public on the climate change debate?
I think there are numerous ones. I mean, I think we haven't, for example, really seen perhaps the full effects of rising sea levels, but that clearly is something which is, I think, desperately frightening. It's very difficult. I mean, one of the things I do in my spare time, what I have is I ski. It's pretty frightening to look at glaciers in the Alps, actually, and you look at, you know, the Aletsch Glacier, which is the biggest glacier, I think, in Europe, and see how much that's diminished over the last 15 or 20 years. The trouble with the polar ice cap, of course, is that it's quite a long way away, and people generally don't go to the poles. But, you know, how many people ski in Britain? Something like 1.5 million. Maybe things which are closer to home might be more relevant to people in the street. Skiing isn't just an effete,
I'm a skier myself.
Privileged thing any longer, you know. And I think that those sorts of issues. Of course, the trouble always is that one of the problems with climate change is the curious unpredictability of our weather, and often it seems that we're getting colder rather than hotter.
Yes.
But, you know, the chaotic nature of weather is a very difficult issue, I think, for people to grasp. I find it difficult to grasp, but I can't believe that other people don't as well.
It is immensely complicated, but I think, again, there's some evidence that public's views about weather are more mature than some of us might suspect, in that a couple of cold winters recently have actually helped people's understanding that you know, global warming may mean more extreme weather. We may get more weather, more unpredictable weather, and the sort of the classic tabloid assumption that if we have 2 cold winters, then belief that climate change is happening might plummet has just not been borne out by the polling that's been done. So I think
it's just
that's quite encouraging.
People sit around and smile and say, "Well, it's just those people in Exeter."
I think I think people joke about it
with their huge computer, you know, which they claim they can predict the weather 7 days ahead of one kilometre square.
I know.
I mean,
that is a very bold claim. Well,
it is a bold claim, and it's exactly the problem that we're facing, isn't it? I mean, I don't mean to criticise the Meteorological Office, of course. You know, it's a splendid institution, and it does fantastically good work, and it's an important part of the British economy now, of course, as well.
Yes,
it sells its wares around the world. But you know, we are at risk, I think, of making claims which we find difficult to substantiate. We biologists do it all the time. And it you know, look at the claims we've made for the genome sequencing 10 years on. Who's benefited? I mean, we may do.
But that research is still ongoing.
Absolutely.
So it seems to me you're, in summary, if I may, you're calling for some humility on the part of scientists in not making oversimplistic claims or over exaggerated claims about their work, but also a plea for the human touch in the communication of science, including the science of climate change, so that we use stories as well as facts and statistics to engage the public. Is that a fair summary?
I think that's true, yes. Certainly we need to have some humility about what we're saying. I think it's really important that we try to measure what we do with public engagement, now as never before. And that's not being done much. I mean, there's some attempt to try and do that now, but there are sophisticated ways we should be, which are not terribly expensive, I think, in my view, to see how we can have more effective debate with people. But that means we have to listen to the public as well.
Yes.
Because ultimately, we live and worship democracy, you know, and so we have to accept that people may have a differing view from us. I would have thought that most people will want to see the planet, well, our life on the planet, preserved. It would seem rather foolish to think in an alternative. But there needs to be a much greater accord, and that has to be with better public engagement, and I'm afraid that that is not really happening enough at the moment.
Lord Winston, thank you very much indeed.